hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon.
My son stopped me at the hospital door after I'd driven 15 hours straight and said the words that would cost them everything. Mom, what are you doing here? My wife said she doesn't want you around. 4 days later, when the hospital called asking how I'd like to pay the $2,300 delivery bill, music, I smiled for the first time since my grandson was born. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me back up and explain how we got to this delicious moment of karma. 3 weeks earlier, my daughter-in-law Jessica had called me practically glowing through the phone. Mom Carol, the baby's due any day now, and would love for you to be here when he arrives. You're going to be such an amazing grandmother. I should have known something was off when she started calling me Mom Carol instead of just Carol. After 5 years of marriage to my son, David, she'd never been that warm. But the excitement of becoming a grandmother for the first time clouded my judgment. At 65, I'd been dreaming of this moment since David announced the pregnancy 8 months ago. I live in Phoenix. They live in Denver. 15 hours of desert highways and mountain passes. I packed my best outfits, bought gifts for the baby, and even splurged on a week at a nice hotel near the hospital. This was going to be the most important week of my life. The drive itself was brutal. My back ADHD from sitting so long, but every mile brought me closer to meeting my grandson. I'd stopped only for gas and coffee, calling David twice to check if there was any news. Both times, Jessica answered his phone, sweet as pie, telling me to drive safely and that they couldn't wait to see me. When I finally pulled into the hospital parking garage at 2 a.m. on Tuesday morning, exhausted but exhilarated, I felt like I'd conquered the world. The maternity ward receptionist told me Jessica was in labor, room 314. I practically floated down the hallway, my heart pounding with anticipation. That's when I found David pacing outside the delivery room, looking more stressed than excited. The moment he saw me, his face changed. Not relief, not joy, something closer to panic. Mom, what are you doing here? The question hit me like a slap. What do you mean? Jessica invited me. She called and said, you wanted me here for the birth. David's eyes darted toward the delivery room door, then back to me. He looked like a man caught between two impossible choices. She changed her mind about having family here. She wants it to be just us. But I drove 15 hours, David. I'm here now. I'm not asking to be in the delivery room just to be nearby when my grandson arrives. I know, Mom, but Jessica's really adamant about this. You know how emotional she gets. And the doctor said stress could complicate the delivery. Something in his voice told me this wasn't Jessica's sudden change of heart. This felt planned, orchestrated, but I was too tired and too shocked to fight in a hospital corridor. Fine, I said quietly. I'll go to my hotel and wait for your call. David looked relieved, which only confirmed my suspicion that I was being deliberately pushed out. Thanks, Mom. I'll call you as soon as the baby's born. Okay. I spent the next 8 hours in my hotel room checking my phone every 10 minutes. When David finally called at 10 a.m. Wednesday morning, his voice was exhausted but happy. Mom, his hair. Nathan David Martinez, 7 pounds 2 ounces. His. Perfect. Congratulations, honey. When can I meet him? Another pause. Jessica's really tired, Mom. The delivery was rough. Maybe give us a day or two to settle in. I felt like I was begging for scraps from my own family. David, I'm his grandmother. I drove 15 hours to be here. I know, and we appreciate that. But Jessica needs to recover. You understand, right? No, I didn't understand. But I agreed because what choice did I have? I spent 2 more days in that hotel room ordering room service and watching terrible daytime television while my son and his wife bonded with my grandson in a hospital 3 miles away. Friday morning came and went with no call. I finally drove to the hospital myself, determined to at least see my grandson through the nursery window. That's when I discovered they'd already been discharged. I called David immediately. You took the baby home without even telling me. Mom, Jessica wanted to get home to her own space. She's been really anxious about germs and visitors. I'm not a visitor, David. I'm your mother. I'm Nathan's grandmother. I know that. Look, maybe next month when things settle down. Next month. I'd driven 15 hours to see my grandson next month. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I hung up, packed my bags, and drove back to Phoenix. If they wanted to exclude me from Nathan's birth, fine. But they'd learned that actions have consequences. Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Denver General Hospital. Is this Carol Martinez? Yes. We have some paperwork issues regarding the birth of Nathan David Martinez. The insurance claim was denied, and we need to discuss payment arrangements for the delivery bill. My heart started pounding, but not with anxiety, with something much more satisfying. I'm sorry, but I think there's been some confusion. I'm not responsible for that bill. Our records show you as the financial guarantor for Jessica Martinez's delivery, and that's when I realized exactly what my dear daughter-in-law had done while I was driving across 2 states to be there for my grandson's birth. According to our records, you signed financial responsibility forms for Mrs. Jessica Martinez's delivery. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, my mind racing. When exactly was this form signed? Let me check. It shows here that the forms were submitted electronically on November 15th at 11:47 p.m., November 15th. The night I was driving through the middle of nowhere, Utah, probably around the time I stopped for gas near Salt Lake City. I'd been on the road for 8 hours, exhausted and focused on getting to Denver safely. And how exactly were these forms submitted? Electronically through our patient portal through our The signature appears to be yours, Mrs. Martinez. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. While I was white-knuckling it through a snowstorm on I-7, desperate to reach Denver before my grandson was born, Jessica was forging my signature on financial documents. I need to see these forms. Can you email them to me? Certainly. What email address should I use? 20 minutes later, I was staring at documents that made my blood boil. Not only had Jessica forged my signature, but she'd also somehow obtained my social security number, address, and financial information. The forms clearly stated that as the maternal grandmother, except I wasn't the maternal grandmother. I was the paternal grandmother, and Jessica's own mother lived in Seattle. But the most infuriating part was the timing. These forms were submitted while Jessica was sweet-talking me on the phone about being there for the birth, knowing full well that she planned to stick me with the bill while excluding me from actually seeing my grandson. I called the hospital back. This is Carol Martinez. I just reviewed the financial responsibility forms, and I need to report fraud. Fraud? First, I never signed these documents. Second, I'm not the maternal grandmother as stated on the forms. Third, these were submitted without my knowledge or consent while I was driving to Denver at my daughter-in-law's invitation. The billing representative's tone changed immediately. If you're alleging fraud, I need to transfer you to our legal department. Perfect. While I waited on hold, I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Screenshots of Jessica's texts inviting me to Denver, call logs showing when she contacted me, even photos I'd taken during my drive with timestamps proving where I was when the forms were supposedly signed. Mrs. Martinez, this is legal department. I understand you're disputing financial responsibility forms. I'm not disputing them. I'm reporting identity theft and fraud. I have evidence that these documents were forged. For the next hour, I provided the legal department with every detail of Jessica's deception. They were particularly interested in the fact that Jessica had invited me to Denver while simultaneously committing fraud in my name. Mrs. Martinez, this is indeed a serious matter. We'll be filing a police report and turning this over to our fraud investigation team. In the meantime, all charges to your name are suspended pending investigation. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. Jessica had played this perfectly. She'd gotten me out of the way during the bath, had her private family moment, and planned to stick me with a $10 $300 bill as a final insult. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 35 years as a medical billing administrator before retiring. I knew exactly how hospital fraud investigations worked, and I knew Jessica had just committed several felonies. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom, hope you made it home safely. Jessica's doing great and Nathan is such a good baby. We'll send pictures soon." Pictures. After excluding me from his booth and forging financial documents in my name, they thought pictures would smooth things over. I typed back, "Glad everyone's healthy. Looking forward to meeting him soon." What I didn't mention was that I just spent the afternoon ensuring that Jessica's fraud would be thoroughly investigated by both the hospital and local law enforcement. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. Tuesday morning brought another call from Denver General. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Detective Richardson with the Denver Police Department. We've been assigned to investigate the fraud case. You reported. We need to ask you some questions." "Of course. Can you walk me through the timeline of events leading up to the alleged document forgery?" For the next 45 minutes, I provided Detective Richardson with a detailed account of everything that had happened. Jessica's invitation, the 15-hour drive, being turned away at the hospital, the subsequent exclusion from seeing my grandson, and finally discovering the fraudulent financial responsibility forms. "Mrs. Martinez, do you have any documentation supporting your version of events?" "I have text messages, call logs, photos from my drive with GPS timestamps, and hotel receipts proving I was traveling when the forms were allegedly signed by me. We'll need copies of all of that. This is shaping up to be a clear case of identity theft and fraud. The fact that the perpetrator invited you to travel while committing crimes in your name suggests premeditation." Premeditation. Jessica hadn't just made a desperate decision in the moment. She'd planned this entire scenario. The invitation, the exclusion, the fraud, all of it had been calculated to humiliate me while sticking me with the medical bills. "Detective, what happens next?" "We'll be obtaining warrants for financial records, hospital surveillance footage, and digital evidence from the submission of these fraudulent forms. If our investigation confirms what you've told me, your daughter-in-law will be facing several felony charges." After ending the call, I realized I felt lighter than I had in days. Not because I wanted Jessica to face criminal charges, but because finally someone was taking this seriously. I wasn't being paranoid or oversensitive. I'd been the victim of a calculated crime. My doorbell rang that afternoon. Through the peephole, I could see a woman in her 30s holding a manila envelope. "Carol Martinez." "Yes, I'm Sarah Chen, investigator with Denver General Hospital's Fraud Prevention Department. I have some documents for you to review." She handed me the envelope and waited while I opened it. Inside were printed copies of the security footage from the night the fraudulent forms were submitted. The screenshots showed Jessica at a computer in the hospital's family lounge typing on their patient portal system. "Mrs. Martinez." These images were captured at 11:52 p.m. on November 15th, approximately 5 minutes after the financial responsibility forms were submitted under your name. There was Jessica, clear as day, hunched over a laptop in the hospital's waiting area. The timestamp showed I was still 4 hours away from Denver, somewhere in the Utah mountains with no cell service. "What happens now?" I asked. "The evidence is overwhelming. Hospital fraud is a federal offense when it involves identity theft across state lines. Your daughter-in-law is looking at significant jail time and financial penalties." As Sarah Chen drove away, I sat on my front porch watching the Arizona sunset and thinking about how drastically everything had changed. A week ago, I'd been a grandmother driving across the country to welcome my first grandson. Now I was a victim of identity theft with my daughter-in-law facing federal charges. My phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" David's voice was shaking with anger, but underneath I heard something else. "Fear. Hello to you, too, David. I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Don't play games with me. The police showed up at our house this morning with a warrant. Jessica's been arrested for fraud. They said you pressed charges." I settled back in my porch chair, watching a roadrunner dart across my front yard. I didn't press charges, David. I simply reported identity theft when the hospital called asking how I wanted to pay Jessica's delivery bill. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "What delivery bill?" "The $10,300 bill for Nathan's birth that your wife stuck me with while you two were playing Happy Family without me." "That's impossible. Our insurance covered everything." Poor David. Still so naive about the woman he'd married. "Your insurance was denied. Honey, that's why the hospital called me. Apparently, Jessica made me financially responsible for her delivery while I was driving through Utah to see my grandson, who I was then not allowed to meet." Another long silence. I could practically hear the pieces clicking together in his mind. "Mom, there has to be some explanation. Jessica wouldn't do something like that, wouldn't she? The same woman who invited me to drive 15 hours for the birth, then had you tame me away at the hospital door. The same woman who's avoided every one of my calls for the past week. She's been recovering from childbirth. David, she forged my signature on legal documents. There's security footage of her doing it. This isn't a misunderstanding." I heard Jessica's voice in the background, shrill and panicked. David covered the phone, but I could make out fragments of their conversation. Jessica claiming it was all a mistake, that she'd only put my name down as emergency contact, that she never meant for me to be responsible for the bills. "Mom," David came back on the line. "Jessica says this is all a misunderstanding. She put you down as emergency contact, not financial guarantor." "David, I've seen the documents. I was a medical billing administrator for 35 years. I know the difference between an emergency contact form and a financial responsibility agreement. Your wife committed fraud." Jesus Christ. His voice cracked. "Mom, what happens now?" "That depends on Jessica. The detective told me that if she makes full restitution and admits responsibility, they might consider reduced charges." "But, David, she didn't just steal from me. She humiliated me. She made me drive across 2 states to be rejected at my own grandson's birth, then tried to stick me with the bill for the privilege." "I know, and I'm sorry about that, but criminal charges, prison. She just had a baby, Mom, and I just became a grandmother." "David, that didn't stop her from committing identity theft." I could hear Nathan crying in the background, and my heart clenched. This should have been such a happy time. My first grandson, healthy and perfect, and instead I was discussing felony charges with his father. "What do you want me to do?" David asked finally. "I want you to be honest with me about what really happened. Did Jessica plan to exclude me from the birth from the beginning?" Another pause. Then, so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. "Yes." The confirmation hit harder than I'd expected, even though I'd known it was true. "Why?" She said having you there would be stressful, that she wanted the birth to be just our immediate family. "I am immediate family, David. I'm your mother. I'm Nathan's grandmother. I know. I should have stood up to her. I should have told you what she was planning instead of letting you drive all that way." "Yes, you should have. But you chose to protect her feelings instead of mine. And now she's facing federal charges because neither of you thought about consequences." Jessica's voice got louder in the background, and suddenly she was on the phone. "Carol, this is all a horrible mistake. I never meant for you to be responsible for any bills. I was in labor. I was scared. I just put down names on forms without thinking." "Jessica, you submitted those forms at midnight while texting me about being excited to see me. You knew exactly what you were doing. Please, I just had a baby. My hormones all over the place. Can't we work this out as a family? We stopped being family when you forged my signature, Jessica. We stopped being family when you excluded me from my grandson's birth after making me drive 15 hours. Now we're just 2 people on opposite sides of a criminal investigation. You can't do this to us." "What about Nathan? Do you want him to grow up without his mother?" The manipulation was breathtaking. After everything she'd done, Jessica was trying to make me the villain for reporting her crimes. "I want Nathan to grow up with honest parents." Unfortunately, that seems to be asking too much. "Carol, please, I'll pay the Hospital bill. I'll do whatever you want. Just drop the charges. I can't drop charges I didn't file. Jessica, the hospital filed them when they discovered the fraud. The police are pursuing them because you committed multiple felonies. This isn't about what I want anymore. David came back on the phone. Mom, Jessica's attorney says if you don't cooperate with the prosecution, the charges will probably be dismissed. And what exactly are you asking me to do, David? Just don't testify. Don't provide evidence. Let this whole thing go away. I closed my eyes and thought about all the years I'd supported David. The college tuition I'd helped pay. The down payment on his first apartment. The car I'd co-signed for when his credit was shaky. The countless times I'd put his needs before my own. David, your wife committed identity theft. She defrauded a hospital. She excluded me from my grandson's birth after manipulating me into traveling across the country. And now you want me to help her escape. Consequences for all of that. She's family, Mom. No, David. Family doesn't do what Jessica did to me. Family doesn't humiliate each other and then commit crimes to cover their tracks. So that's it. You're going to send Nathan's mother to prison. I'm going to tell the truth when asked. What happens after that is up to a judge and jury. I hung up and sat in the darkening evening, listening to coyotes howl in the distance. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I turned it off. Tomorrow, I had an appointment with the FBI agent assigned to the case, and I had a feeling things were about to get much more complicated. Because what I hadn't told David was that the investigation had uncovered something else. Jessica's fraud wasn't limited to my grandson's birth. The agents had found evidence of similar schemes involving at least 3 other family members over the past 2 years. Jessica Martinez wasn't just a new mother who'd made some poor decisions. She was a serial fraudster. And my case was just the tip of the iceberg. FBI agent Lisa Chen had the kind of calm, professional demeanor that probably came from years of investigating financial crimes. She sat across from me in my living room, a thick file folder on the coffee table between us. Mrs. Martinez, I need to prepare you for what we've discovered during our investigation into Jessica Martinez's activities. I'd been expecting this conversation since yesterday's phone call from David. The way he'd sounded, desperate and cornered, told me there was more to this story than just my fraudulent hospital bill. How bad is it? Agent Chen opened her file. Over the past 36 months, Jessica Martinez has committed identity theft and fraud against no fewer than 6 family members across 4 states. The total amount stolen exceeds $47,000. My stomach dropped. 6 people. Your case involving the hospital bill was actually what broke this open for us. When we started investigating, we found a pattern of Jessica obtaining personal information from family members and using it to open credit cards, take out small loans, and submit fraudulent insurance claims. She handed me a document showing a timeline of Jessica's crimes. David's younger sister, Emma, in California, had $8,000 in unauthorized charges on credit cards Jessica had opened in her name. Jessica's own sister in Seattle had been stuck with a $5,000 emergency room bill that Jessica had somehow managed to transfer to her. David's cousin Jake in Texas had a $12,000 car loan taken out in his name that he'd never applied for. Did any of them know what was happening? Most of them thought they were isolated incidents. A paperwork mix-up here, an identity theft there. Jessica was very careful to keep her fraudulent activities spread out geographically and temporally so no one would see the pattern. But people had to know something was wrong. They did. But Jessica was skilled at providing plausible explanations. She'd claim computer errors, clerical mistakes, or temporary financial difficulties that she promised to resolve immediately. She'd often send partial payments to keep victims from pursuing the matter too aggressively. Agent Chen pulled out another document. The birth certificate fraud involving your grandson was actually the most sophisticated scheme we've seen. She didn't just steal your financial information. She created an entire false narrative about your relationship to the child to justify making you financially responsible. What do you mean? On the hospital forms, Jessica claimed you were the maternal grandmother and had specifically requested to be financially responsible for the delivery as a gift to the new parents. She forged your signature on documents stating that you were excited to cover all costs related to the birth. The audacity was staggering. Not only had Jessica excluded me from Nathan's birth, she'd also created a fake story about my enthusiasm for paying for the privilege of being excluded. She told the hospital billing department that you were wealthy and had specifically asked to handle all expenses as your contribution to the family. That's why they called you so confidently about payment, while she was actually excluding me from meeting my own grandson. Exactly. The cruelty of it is what makes this case particularly compelling for prosecution. It wasn't just financial fraud. It was psychological manipulation designed to maximize emotional damage while generating financial benefit for the perpetrator. Agent Chen closed the file and looked at me directly. Mrs. Martinez, I need you to understand something. Jessica's crimes weren't impulsive decisions made under stress. This was a calculated pattern of behavior spanning years. She's stolen from family members who trusted her, destroyed relationships, and shown no remorse until she got caught. What happens now? She's facing federal charges that could result in 15 to 20 years in prison. The state charges for identity theft could add another 5 to 10 years with 6 victims across multiple states and a pattern of sophisticated fraud. This is a very serious case. My phone had been ringing all morning. David calling every hour. Jessica's mother calling from Seattle. Even David's sister Emma calling from California. I hadn't answered any of them. Agent Chen, can I ask you something? How did Jessica get all this personal information about family members? Social media mostly. She was very active in family Facebook groups. Birthday posts, anniversary celebrations. People post their birth dates, their children's full names, their anniversary dates. Jessica collected all of that information and used it to answer security questions when opening accounts. She used our own family connections against us. It's more common than you might think. Family members often have access to the kind of personal information needed for financial fraud, and they're usually the last people we suspect. After Agent Chen left, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. 23 missed calls, 15 text messages, all from family members who suddenly wanted to talk to me about Jessica's misunderstanding with the hospital bill. I decided to call Emma first. She'd always been my favorite of David's siblings, and I was curious about her perspective on Jessica's crimes. Aunt Carol, thank God you called back. David told me what's happening with Jessica and the hospital bills. This is all so crazy. Emma, Agent Chen told me that Jessica stole from you, too. $8,000 in credit card fraud. Silence. Then, how did you know about that? Because we're all victims of the same person, sweetheart. What did she tell you when it happened? She said it was a mistake, that she'd accidentally used my information instead of hers when applying for a card. She said she was mortified and promised to handle everything. She even made payments for a few months, but she never paid it all off. No. And when I tried to pursue it, she got defensive and said I was trying to destroy her family over a paperwork error. David sided with her, said I was being vindictive. Emma, that wasn't a paperwork error. That was identity theft, and it wasn't an isolated incident. I spent the next 30 minutes telling Emma about the 6 victims, the pattern of fraud, and the sophisticated nature of Jessica's crimes. By the end of the call, Emma was crying. I feel so stupid. I should have reported it immediately instead of believing her lies. You trusted family. That's not stupid. That's normal. What are you going to do? I'm going to testify truthfully about what happened to me. Jessica made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. That evening, David showed up at my door. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, holding Nathan against his chest like a shield. Mom, we need to talk. I looked at my grandson for the first time, and my heart melted completely. He was perfect, tiny, and peaceful, sleeping against his father's chest. This should have been the happiest moment of my life, finally meeting Nathan. Instead, it was happening in the shadow of his mother's crimes. His beautiful David. Mom, please. Jessica's looking at 20 years in prison. Nathan needs his mother. Nathan needs honest parents who don't commit felonies. She made mistakes, but she's not a monster. She's scared of not having enough money. She grew up poor, and she panics about financial security. David, she stole from 6 different family members. Over 3 years. That's not panic. That's criminal behavior. Please just consider not testifying. Without your cooperation, the federal case falls apart. I held out my arms for Nathan, and David reluctantly handed him over. My grandson was warm and solid and perfect. I'd driven 15 hours to meet him, only to be turned away at the hospital door by his criminal mother. David, answer me honestly. Did you know what Jessica was doing to other family members? No. I swear I didn't know about any of it. But you knew she was excluding me from the birth while pretending I was welcome. Yes, and I should have stopped that. I should have stood up to her. You chose her over me, David. You chose to protect her lies instead of protecting me from fraud and humiliation. I love you, Mom, but she's my wife. She's the mother of my child. I looked down at Nathan, sleeping peacefully in my arms. Such an innocent little boy born into such a complicated situation. What happens to Nathan if Jessica goes to prison? I don't know. I can't afford childcare and work full-time. My salary barely covers the mortgage. And there it was, the real reason for this visit. David wasn't just asking me to protect Jessica from consequences. He was asking me to solve his childcare problems by allowing a federal crime to go unpunished. That sounds like something you should have considered before you married a criminal, David. I handed Nathan back to his father and walked to my front door. Mom, please. Good night. David, give my love to your son. As I closed the door behind them, I realized that my relationship with David might never recover from this. But some things were more important than keeping peace in the family. Some things were worth fighting for, even when it meant standing alone. The courthouse steps were slick with morning dew. As I walked toward the federal building in downtown Phoenix, Agent Chen had explained that due to the multi-state nature of Jessica's crimes, the case would be prosecuted in federal court rather than local courts, and that meant traveling to the regional facility for pretrial proceedings. Jessica's preliminary hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. I didn't have to be there as a witness wouldn't be called until trial, but I wanted to see her face when the full scope of her crimes was read aloud in open court. The courtroom was nearly empty, just the attorneys, court staff, a few family members, and me sitting in the back row. Jessica sat at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands shackled. She looked small and scared. Nothing like the confident woman who'd manipulated me into driving 15 hours just to humiliate me. David sat in the front row holding Nathan, flanked by Jessica's parents, who'd flown in from Seattle. None of them acknowledged my presence, though I saw David's shoulders tense when I entered the room. The United States versus Jessica Marie Martinez, the clock announced. Case number 2024, CR 1847. Federal prosecutor Sarah Williams stood up with a file that seemed impossibly thick for someone I'd thought of as just my manipulative daughter-in-law. Your Honor, the defendant is charged with 6 counts of identity theft, 4 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of mail fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud across state lines. The government alleges that over a 36-month period, the defendant systematically targeted family members for financial exploitation, stealing over $47,000 and causing significant emotional and financial damage to the victims. The judge, an elderly woman with sharp eyes, reviewed the charges carefully. Ms. Martinez, you're being represented by counsel today. Jessica's attorney, a young man who looked overwhelmed by the complexity of the case, stood up. Yes, Your Honor. Michael Stevens, representing the defendant. Mr. Stevens, has your client been informed of the charges against her? She has, Your Honor. We're entering a plea of not guilty to all charges. Not guilty, even with video footage of her submitting fraudulent documents. Jessica was going to claim innocence. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow I was. Your Honor, Prosecutor Williams continued, the government requests that the defendant remain in custody pending trial. Ms. Martinez has demonstrated a pattern of deceptive behavior toward family members, and several victims have reported receiving threatening communications since her arrest. Threatening communications. I wondered if that included the dozen voicemails Jessica had left on my phone over the past week, alternately begging for mercy and accusing me of destroying her family. Mr. Stevens, your response. Your Honor, my client is a new mother with no prior criminal record. She has strong ties to the community and poses no flight risk. We request release on own recognizance. The prosecutor stood again. Your Honor, the defendant committed identity theft against 6 family members across 4 states over 3 years. This shows sophisticated criminal planning and a willingness to exploit the people who trusted her most. Additionally, the defendant's crimes against victim Carol Martinez involved elaborate deception designed to maximize both financial damage and emotional trauma. Judge Morrison looked directly at Jessica for the first time. Ms. Martinez, you defrauded your husband's grandmother. It was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I never intended. You forged her signature on legal documents while she was traveling across the country at your invitation to attend your child's birth. Jessica's attorney touched her arm, trying to get her to stop talking, but she continued, I was in labor, Your Honor. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just needed someone to take financial responsibility, and my mother-in-law has means you excluded her from the birth after making her drive 15 hours to attend. That was a medical decision. My doctor recommended. Judge Morrison held up her hand. Miss Martinez, you're making this worse for yourself. Mr. Stevens, control your client. The judge reviewed the case file for another few minutes while Jessica whispered urgently with her attorney. Finally, she looked up. Given the sophisticated nature of these crimes, the pattern of behavior spanning multiple years, and the defendant's apparent inability to take responsibility for her actions, I'm denying bail. Ms. Martinez will remain in federal custody pending trial. Jessica burst into tears, but they looked calculated to me. The same kind of manipulative crying I'd watched her use on David whenever she wanted something. David stood up from the gallery. Your Honor, she just had a baby. Our son needs his mother. Sir, please sit down. This is not the appropriate time for outbursts. But Your Honor, Mr. Martinez, sit down now or I'll hold you in contempt. David sank back into his seat, clutching Nathan tighter. Jessica's mother was openly weeping. Her father sat stone-faced, staring at his daughter like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. As the court officers led Jessica away, she turned and looked directly at me. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't manipulation or self-pity. It was pure hatred. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse and sat on a bench across the street, watching David's family emerge. They stood on the courthouse steps for several minutes, probably arguing about what to do next. Finally, Jessica's parents got in their car and drove away without saying goodbye to David or Nathan. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope you're proud of yourself. You destroyed my daughter's life, Jessica's mother. Apparently, I deleted the message without responding. Another text came immediately after. Nathan will grow up without his mother because of your vindictiveness. I turned off my phone and drove home thinking about vindictiveness. Was it vindictive to report crimes committed against me? Was it vindictive to refuse to help criminals escape consequences for their actions? Or was it vindictive to invite your mother-in-law to drive 15 hours for her grandson's birth, exclude her from the hospital, forge her signature on financial documents, and then try to manipulate her into silence when she discovered the fraud? That evening, I received a call from Agent Chen. Mrs. Martinez, I wanted to update you on the case. Jessica's attorney reached out about a possible plea agreement. What kind of plea? Full restitution to all victims, guilty pleas to reduce charges, and a recommended sentence of 5 years with possibility of parole after 3. What do you think? Honestly, I think she should take it. If this goes to trial and she's convicted on all charges, she's looking at 20 years minimum. But the decision isn't mine to make. What happens next? The prosecutor will present the plea offer to all 6 victims. If everyone agrees, Jessica can avoid trial. If anyone objects, we proceed to full prosecution. After hanging up, I walk through my house thinking about justice versus mercy. Jessica had systematically stolen from family members who trusted her. She'd manipulated me into one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. She'd shown no remorse until she got caught. And even then, she was trying to blame everyone except herself. But she was also Nathan's mother. And David was going to struggle as a single parent if she went to prison for 20 years. My phone rang. David's name on the screen. Mom, did Agent Chen call you about the plea deal? She did. Will you accept it? I looked at the framed photo on my mantel taken during happier times when David was small, and I thought I understood how family relationships were supposed to work. I need some time to think about it, David. Mom, please. 5 years is already a long time. Nathan will be in kindergarten when she gets out. Your wife committed federal crimes against 6 people. David, 3 years seems like a pretty light sentence for that level of betrayal. But it's not just about Jessica. It's about Nathan. It's about our family. David, our family stopped existing the moment Jessica decided to commit identity theft against me. What we have now is just the aftermath of her choices. I hung up and sat in my quiet house, thinking about what justice should look like for a woman who'd used family love as a weapon against the people who trusted her most. The deadline for responding to the plea offer was Friday. I had 3 days to decide whether Jessica Martinez deserved mercy or justice, and I was discovering that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them from the consequences of their own actions. I rejected the plea deal on Friday morning, and by Friday afternoon, Jessica's attorney was calling me personally to negotiate. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. Mrs. Martinez, this is Michael Stevens, Jessica's attorney. I understand you have concerns about the proposed plea agreement. I was in my garden deadheading roses and enjoying the Arizona sunshine. Mr. Stevens, I have concerns about your client committing federal crimes against my family. I appreciate your position, but I think you should consider the impact of a lengthy trial on your grandson. The media attention, the family stress. There it was. The attempt to make me responsible for the consequences of Jessica's choices. Mr. Stevens, my grandson's well-being should have been Jessica's priority before she decided to become a career criminal. Mrs. Martinez, I think there may be some information that could change your perspective on this case. Something in his tone made me stop pruning. What kind of information? Could we meet in person? There are complications in this case that the prosecutor may not have shared with you. 2 hours later, I sat across from Michael Stevens in his downtown Phoenix office. He looked nervous, constantly adjusting his tie and avoiding eye contact. Mrs. Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is confidential attorney-client information that Jessica has authorized me to share in hopes of reaching a resolution. I'm listening. Jessica's crimes weren't entirely her own idea. She was being coerced. I almost laughed. Coerced? By whom? Her previous husband. Jessica was married before she met David to a man named Marcus Webb. Their divorce was complicated. Stevens pulled out a file folder. Marcus Webb is a professional con artist with a history of sophisticated financial fraud schemes. He trained Jessica in identity theft techniques and forced her to target her new family after she remarried. Forced her how? Blackmail. Marcus has compromising information about Jessica's past that could destroy her marriage to David and her relationship with your family. I stayed at Stevens trying to process this absurd story. So Jessica committed federal crimes against 6 family members because her ex-husband made her do it, essentially. Yes, she's been sending Marcus half of everything she stole to keep him from revealing her secrets. What secrets? Stevens hesitated. Jessica has a criminal record from before she met David. Identity theft, fraud, several other charges. She served 18 months in prison in Oregon before moving to Colorado and reinventing herself. The room felt like it was spinning. David doesn't know about this. No one knows. Jessica changed her last name, moved states, and created an entirely new identity when she met David. Marcus discovered her new life and has been exploiting her ever since. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. If this was true, it meant Jessica wasn't just a desperate new mother who'd made bad decisions. She was a career criminal with an extensive history of fraud who'd lied about her entire identity to marry my son. Mr. Stevens, why are you telling me this? Because Jessica is terrified that if this goes to trial, Marcus will surface as a witness and reveal everything. She's more afraid of David discovering her past than she is of going to prison. And you think this information should make me more sympathetic to her? I think it explains why she made the choices she did. Jessica isn't the master criminal the prosecutor is portraying. She's a victim herself. I stood up and gathered my purse. Mr. Stevens, let me see if I understand this correctly. Your client is a convicted felon who lied about her identity, married my son under false pretenses, committed crimes against his family while being blackmailed by her criminal ex-husband. And you think this makes her more sympathetic? Mrs. Martinez, the only thing this information tells me is that Jessica is a more sophisticated criminal than I realized and that my son has been living with a complete stranger for 5 years. Please, just consider. I'm considering calling David immediately to warn him that he's married to a convicted felon. Stevens stood up quickly. Mrs. Martinez, that would violate attorney-client privilege. I shared this information in confidence. You shared it hoping I'd feel sorry for your client. Instead, you've convinced me that she's even more dangerous than I thought. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Mr. Stevens, when this goes to trial, make sure the prosecutor knows about Marcus. Webb, if Jessica's been sending stolen money to a known criminal, that's another federal crime. Mrs. Martinez, please. Good day, Mr. Stevens. I drove home in a daze. Jessica wasn't just my daughter-in-law who'd made bad decisions. She was a career criminal who'd infiltrated my family under false pretenses. David had no idea who he'd really married. Nathan had been born to a woman who'd been lying about her identity since before she met his father. My phone was ringing when I walked in the door. David's name on the screen. Mom, Jessica's attorney said you met with him today. I did. He said you're still refusing the plea deal. That's correct. Mom, please. Jessica's already facing 5 years in prison. How is that not enough? I sat down at my kitchen table and stared at the photo of David's graduation from college, back when I thought I understood who my family was. David, did Jessica ever tell you about her life before she moved to Colorado? Of course. She grew up in Seattle, went to college in Oregon, worked in retail management before we met. Why? Did she ever mention being married before? Silence. Then what are you talking about? Did she ever mention a criminal record? Mom, what the hell is going on? David, I think you need to sit down and you might want to arrange for someone to watch Nathan while we talk. As I prepared to destroy my son's understanding of his wife and the mother of his child, I realized that Jessica's crimes against me were just the beginning. The real crime was what she'd done to David, building their entire relationship on an elaborate lie that was about to come crashing down. David's silence on the phone stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. David, are you still there? Criminal record? His voice was barely a whisper. Mom, what are you talking about? Jessica served 18 months in prison in Oregon for identity theft and fraud before she moved to Colorado and met you. That's impossible. I would have known. She changed her name and created a new identity. David, her attorney told me this afternoon. She's not who you think she is. I heard Nathan crying in the background, and David's voice became muffled as he tried to comfort his son while processing the information that his wife was a stranger. Mom, how do you know this? How can this be true? Her attorney told me she's been blackmailed by her ex-husband, a man named Marcus Webb, who's also a professional criminal. She's been stealing from our family and sending half the money to him to keep him quiet about her past. The crying in the background stopped and I could hear David moving around, probably going somewhere private to continue the conversation. Jesus Christ. Mom, are you sure about this? David, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Jessica has been lying to you about everything since the day you met. Her background, her family situation, her reasons for moving to Colorado, all of it. But I met her parents. I've talked to her sister. Did you? Or did you meet people she introduced as her parents and sister? Another long pause. I could practically hear David's world crashing down around him. Mom, what am I supposed to do with this information? You need to protect yourself and Nathan. If Jessica has been living under a false identity, there could be financial implications, legal problems, immigration issues. Immigration issues. David, you don't know who she really is. You have no idea what other secrets she's hiding. I need to confront her. She's in federal custody. David, you can't just show up and demand answers. Then I need to hire my own attorney. I need to find out what else she's lied about. That's probably a good idea. Mom, if this is all true, if she's been lying about everything, then Nathan and I are both victims of her fraud. Yes, you are. She made me complicit in excluding you from Nathan's birth. She made me choose sides between my wife and my mother when I should have been protecting both of you from her. Lies. David, you couldn't have known. But I should have questioned it when she insisted you couldn't be at the hospital. When she kept making excuses for why you couldn't visit. I should have realized something was wrong. I heard the pain in his voice and wished I could take it away. But David needed to understand the full scope of what Jessica had done to their family. There's something else. David. What? According to her attorney, Jessica is more afraid of you discovering her past than she is of going to prison. She'd rather serve 20 years than have you know who she really is. Well, it's too late for that now. David, I want you to think about something. If Jessica has been stealing from family members and sending money to her ex-husband, what else has she been lying about? Your finances, your legal status as a married couple, Nathan's paternity. Mom, don't. I can't even think about that right now. I know it's horrible, but you need to consider all possibilities. You need to protect yourself and Nathan. After hanging up with David, I sat in my quiet house thinking about how many lives Jessica had destroyed with her lies. Not just the 6 family members she'd stolen from, but David, who'd married a stranger, Nathan, who'd been born into a web of deception, and even Jessica's fake family who'd been playing roles in her elaborate fiction. My phone rang again. Agent Chen, Mrs. Martinez, I just got some interesting information from Jessica's attorney. Apparently, she's been cooperative about providing details on her accomplice, Marcus Webb, her ex-husband. According to Jessica, Webb has been running similar blackmail schemes against other women across the western states. She's agreed to provide evidence against him in exchange for consideration at sentencing. What kind of evidence? Financial records, communication logs, details about his other victims. If Jessica's information leads to Webb's arrest, it could significantly impact her own sentence. Agent Chen, can I ask you something? Did you know about Jessica's criminal record in Oregon? We discovered that during our background investigation. Yes, Jessica Martinez isn't her real name. What is her real name? Jennifer Webb. She was married to Marcus Webb when she committed her first series of identity theft crimes in Oregon. Their divorce was part of a plea agreement where she testified against him, but he was acquitted on a technicality. Jennifer Webb. My daughter-in-law's real name was Jennifer Webb, and she'd been lying about her identity for the entire 5 years she'd been married to David. Agent Chen, what happens to my son legally? If his wife has been living under a false identity, is their marriage even legal? That's a complicated question that would depend on Colorado state law and the specific circumstances of their marriage. Your son should definitely consult with a family law attorney. And what about my grandson? Birth certificate issues can usually be resolved through the courts. But again, your son needs legal representation. After ending the call, I realized that Jessica's crimes had created a legal nightmare that would take years to untangle. David's marriage might not be legal. Nathan's birth certificate might be fraudulent. Their finances could be compromised. Their entire life together had been built on lies. My doorbell rang at 8 p.m. Through the peephole, I could see David standing on my front porch holding Nathan and a large duffel bag. David, what are you doing here? Mom, can Nathan and I stay here tonight? I can't be in that house right now. Everything in it reminds me of lies she told me. I opened the door and wrapped my son and grandson in the biggest hug I'd given in months. Of course, you can stay for as long as you need. As I helped David settle Nathan in my guest room, I realized that Jessica's attempt to destroy our family had actually brought David and me closer together. Her lies and manipulation had backfired completely. But I also knew that the worst was yet to come. Because if Jennifer Webb had been living under false identity for 5 years, there were probably other secrets waiting to be discovered. And some of those secrets might be dangerous enough to threaten the safety of my son and grandson. The trial of Jennifer Webb, aka Jessica Martinez, began on a cold Monday morning in February. The federal courthouse in Phoenix was busier than I'd expected, with news vans parked outside and reporters interviewing anyone willing to talk about the case. Agent Chen had warned me that Jessica's case had attracted media attention because of the sophisticated nature of her identity fraud and the fact that she'd victimized her own family members. Family fraud cases always get coverage, she'd explained. People want to understand how someone can betray the people who trust them most. David and I arrived together, leaving Nathan with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. David had been staying with me for 3 weeks now, and we developed a comfortable routine. He'd wake up early to feed Nathan while I made coffee. We'd share breakfast and discuss the day's courtroom strategy, then drive downtown together. "You ready for this?" David asked as we walked up the courthouse steps. "Are you?" I still can't believe I was married to someone whose real name I didn't even know. David's attorney had confirmed that his marriage to Jennifer Webb was legally valid, despite her false identity. But the emotional betrayal was devastating. He'd also learned that Jennifer had been lying about her job, her education, and even her relationship with her supposed family in Seattle. "Mom, I keep thinking about all the times she talked about her childhood, her parents, her college experience. All of it was lies. Every single story. David, you couldn't have known. She was a professional deceiver." Inside the courtroom, I was surprised by how crowded it was. Besides the 6 victim families, there were reporters, law enforcement officials, and what looked like other potential victims who'd come forward since Jennifer's arrest. Jennifer sat at the defendant's table wearing a conservative blue dress, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked nothing like the confident woman who'd manipulated our family for years. She looked small, defeated, and much older than her 32 years. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison. As the trial began, Prosecutor Sarah Williams painted a picture of Jennifer Webb that was even more disturbing than I'd imagined. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant is not who she claims to be. Jennifer Webb has spent the last 8 years living under a false identity, committing identity theft across multiple states, and destroying the lives of people who trusted her most." Williams explained that Jennifer had been arrested in Oregon in 2016 for identity theft and fraud, served 18 months in prison, then disappeared after her release. She'd created the identity of Jessica Martinez using stolen documents, and had moved to Colorado, specifically to find new victims. The defendant didn't just steal money from her victims. She stole their sense of security, their trust in family relationships, and their belief that the people closest to them were who they claimed to be. Jennifer's attorney, Michael Stevens, attempted to portray his client as a victim of circumstance. Jennifer Webb made mistakes, serious mistakes, but she was driven to these actions by fear and desperation. Her ex-husband Marcus Webb is a dangerous criminal who threatened her safety and forced her into criminal activity through blackmail and intimidation. But when Williams cross-examined Jennifer the next day, the victim narrative fell apart completely. "Miss Webb, you testified that Marcus Webb forced you to steal from your husband's family. Is that correct?" "Yes. He threatened to tell David about my past if I didn't send him money. But you were already stealing from family members before Marcus Webb contacted you, weren't you?" Jennifer hesitated. "I don't know what you mean." "I'm referring to the credit card fraud you committed against David's sister, Emma Martinez, in March 2022. Marcus Webb didn't contact you until June 2022, according to your own testimony." Jennifer's face went pale. That was different. That was a mistake." "A mistake? You opened 4 credit cards in Emma Martinez's name, spent $8,000, and made no payments for 6 months. That was a mistake. I was going to pay it back. Just like you were going to pay back the $2,300 hospital bill you fraudulently assigned to Carol Martinez. I was in labor. I wasn't thinking clearly. Williams pulled out a document. Miss Webb, this is a transcript of your phone call with Carol Martinez 3 days before you gave birth, inviting her to drive from Arizona to Colorado for the delivery. Did Marcus Webb force you to make that call? No. But did Marcus Webb force you to exclude Carol Martinez from the hospital after she drove 15 hours to be there? No. Did Marcus Webb force you to forge Carol Martinez's signature on financial documents while she was traveling to see her grandson? No. But you don't understand the pressure I was under. Williams walked closer to the witness stand. Miss Webb, isn't it true that you invited Carol Martinez to Colorado specifically so you could manipulate her into being financially responsible for your delivery? That's not. I didn't plan it that way. Isn't it true that you researched Carol Martinez's financial status before inviting her to the birth? Jennifer didn't answer. Ms. Webb, we have evidence that you accessed Carol Martinez's credit reports and bank statements 2 weeks before your son was born. Did Marcus Webb force you to do that financial research? The courtroom was completely silent. David grabbed my hand, his face white with shock. Ms. Webb, answer the question. No, Jennifer whispered. No, he didn't force me to research her finances. So, you planned to defraud Carol Martinez before you ever invited her to Colorado, didn't you? I thought she could afford it. She has money. Ms. Webb, you planned to humiliate and defraud your husband's mother because you thought she could afford to be victimized. Jennifer started crying, but her tears looked calculated. You don't understand what it's like to be scared all the time. Scared of what, M. Webb? Being honest with your husband about who you really are. Yes. Scared of getting a job to pay your own bills? It's not that simple. Ms. Webb, you stole from 6 family members over 3 years. You lived under a false identity. You excluded your mother-in-law from her grandson's birth after making her travel across 2 states. And you did all of this because you were scared of being honest. Is that your testimony? Yes. Williams turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, fear of honesty is not a defense for federal crimes. As Jennifer was led back to the defendant's table, she looked directly at me for the first time since the trial began. And what I saw in her eyes wasn't remorse or regret. It was pure hatred, the same expression she'd worn when the court officers led her away from the preliminary hearing. Jennifer Webb wasn't a victim. She wasn't a desperate mother who'd made poor choices. She was a predator who targeted my family because she thought we were easy marks. And I had a feeling that the worst revelations were still to come. On Thursday morning of the 2nd week of trial, Prosecutor Williams called a witness I hadn't been expecting. Detective Maria Rodriguez from the Oregon State Police. Detective Rodriguez, can you tell the jury about your investigation into Jennifer Webb in 2016? Certainly. Ms. Webb was arrested as part of a larger investigation into an identity theft ring operating throughout the Pacific Northwest. She was one of 8 defendants in a case involving over $200,000 in fraudulent charges. Williams pulled up a photograph on the courtroom monitor. Do you recognize the man in this photograph? Yes. That's Marcus Webb, Jennifer Webb's husband at the time. He was the ringleader of the operation. Can you describe the nature of their criminal partnership? Marcus Webb recruited vulnerable women, typically those with financial difficulties or emotional problems, and trained them to commit identity theft. Jennifer was his most successful partner. I felt David's hand tighten around mine. Jennifer hadn't been a victim of Marcus Webb's manipulation. She'd been his criminal partner. Detective Rodriguez, what made Jennifer Webb particularly effective at identity theft? She had a natural ability to gain people's trust and access their personal information. She was charming, sympathetic, and able to convince people to share details they would normally keep private, like social security numbers and financial information. Exactly. Jennifer would befriend elderly women, single mothers, people going through divorces, anyone who was emotionally vulnerable. She'd offer help and support while gathering the information she needed to steal their identities. Williams showed another document to the jury. Detective Rodriguez, this is a list of Jennifer Webb's victims from 2016. How many people did she defraud? 14 victims over an 18-month period. Total losses exceeded $85,000. 14 victims. I'd thought Jennifer's crimes against our family were her first attempts at fraud, but she'd been a career criminal long before she met David. Detective Rodriguez, what happened to Marcus Webb? He was acquitted when Jennifer Webb agreed to testify against him as part of her plea agreement. However, we suspected that she didn't provide truthful testimony. What do you mean? Jennifer claimed that Marcus forced her to commit the crimes, that she was an unwilling participant, but our investigation suggested that she was an equal partner who enjoyed the criminal lifestyle. Williams turned to face Jennifer at the defendant's table. Detective Rodriguez, after Jennifer Webb was released from prison in 2018, did she maintain contact with Marcus Webb? Yes. Our surveillance showed that they continued their romantic relationship and their criminal partnership. The divorce was fake, designed to help Jennifer establish a new identity. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Jennifer and Marcus were still married. Jennifer's marriage to David was bigamous. Detective Rodriguez, is Jennifer Webb still married to Marcus Webb? As far as we can determine, yes. There's no record of their divorce ever being finalized. David made a choking sound beside me. He'd been living with a woman who was married to someone else. Someone who was running a criminal enterprise that included defrauding David's family. Detective Rodriguez, do you believe Jennifer Webb moved to Colorado to continue her criminal activities? Objection, Stevens called out. Sustained. Detective Rodriguez, based on your investigation, would you characterize Jennifer Webb as a victim or a perpetrator? Jennifer Webb is one of the most sophisticated identity thieves I've encountered in 20 years of law enforcement. She's not a victim. She's a predator who targets people's emotions and relationships to commit financial crimes. When Detective Rodriguez stepped down, I realized that everything we'd believed about Jennifer was wrong. She wasn't a desperate mother or a victim of an abusive ex-husband. She was a career criminal who'd infiltrated our family as part of a larger criminal operation. During the lunch break, David and I sat in the courthouse cafeteria while he processed the revelation that his marriage was illegal and his wife was a professional criminal. Mom, Nathan isn't legally my son. What do you mean? If Jennifer is still married to Marcus Webb, then her marriage to me is invalid, which means Nathan was born to a married woman who was living with someone else. Legally, Marcus Webb might be considered Nathan's father. I hadn't thought of that implication. Nathan's entire legal status was now in question because of his mother's lies. David, we'll figure this out. You'll always be Nathan's father, regardless of what the paperwork says. But what if Marcus Webb tries to claim parental rights? What if he uses Nathan to get leverage against us? Before I could answer, Agent Chen approached our table. Mr. Martinez, Mrs. Martinez, I need to speak with you privately. We followed her to a conference room down the hall. We've received some disturbing information about Marcus Webb. He's been arrested in Seattle for running a similar scheme involving identity theft and family fraud. Similar how? I asked. He's been placing female accomplices in relationships with wealthy men, having them gather financial information and commit fraud against the men's families. David's face went white. Jennifer wasn't the only one. No. We've identified at least 6 women across 5 states who were working for Marcus Webb. They'd establish relationships with financially stable men, marry them or move in with them, then systematically defraud their families and friends. Agent Chen, I said slowly, are you telling us that Jennifer targeted David specifically because she thought our family had money? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Jennifer researched your family for months before she moved to Colorado. She knew David's profession, his family connections, and your financial status before they ever met. David put his head in his hands. Our entire relationship was a lie. She never loved me. She never wanted a family. It was all just a criminal operation. David, Agent Chen continued, there's something else. Jennifer and Marcus had been planning to disappear with Nathan after she gave birth. They wanted to take your son and use him as leverage to extort money from your family. Extort money? How? Kidnapping for ransom. Essentially, they would have demanded payment for Nathan's safe return. I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. Jennifer hadn't just committed identity theft. She'd planned to kidnap my grandson and hold him for ransom. Agent Chen, where is Marcus Webb now? In federal custody in Seattle. He's been charged with conspiracy, identity theft, fraud, and kidnapping conspiracy. Kidnapping conspiracy. We found detailed plans for taking Nathan and demanding $500,000 from your family for his return. They'd researched your assets, your property values, your retirement accounts. They knew exactly how much they thought you could pay. David looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, they were going to kidnap Nathan and make you pay ransom for your own grandson. As we prepared to return to the courthouse for the afternoon session, I realized that Jennifer's crimes were even worse than we'd imagined. She hadn't just stolen money from us. She'd infiltrated our family, planned to destroy our relationships, and ultimately intended to kidnap Nathan and hold him for ransom. But Jennifer Webb had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated the grandmother she'd tried to humiliate and defraud. And now it was time for her to learn exactly how expensive that mistake was going to be. The final day of Jennifer Webb's trial brought a revelation that no one in the courtroom was prepared for, including me. Agent Chen took the witness stand, looking grimmer than I'd ever seen her. Agent Chen, can you tell the jury about the evidence recovered from Marcus Webb's apartment in Seattle? We recovered extensive documentation of what Mr. E. Webb called family infiltration operations. These included detailed profiles of target families, financial research, and operational plans for each of his accomplices. Williams handed her a thick folder. Agent Chen, did you find documentation related to the Martinez family specifically? Yes. Marcus Webb had been researching the Martinez family for over 2 years before Jennifer made contact with David Martinez. 2 years before Jennifer even moved to Colorado. Yes, the plan to target the Martinez family was developed long before Jennifer and David met. Williams walked to the evidence table and picked up a large poster board. Agent Chen, what did Marcus Webb's research reveal about the Martinez family? He identified David Martinez as an ideal target because of his stable income, his lack of criminal sophistication, and what Webb characterized as exploitable family dynamics. What did Webb mean by exploitable family dynamics? Agent Chen looked directly at me. Webb identified Carol Martinez as what he called a high-value secondary target because of her financial assets and her emotional attachment to family relationships. I felt cold all over. Marcus Webb hadn't just researched David. He'd specifically studied me looking for ways to exploit my love for my family. Agent Chen, what was the ultimate goal of this operation? According to Webb's documentation, the plan was to have Jennifer establish a relationship with David, gain access to family financial information, commit systematic fraud against all family members, and then disappear with any children born during the relationship. Disappear how? Webb had detailed plans for fake deaths. Jennifer was supposed to stage her own death and Nathan's death in a car accident, then disappear with Webb and the child. This would have allowed them to collect life insurance payments while maintaining control of Nathan for future extortion schemes. The courtroom was completely silent. Jennifer had planned to fake her own death and Nathan's death, letting David grieve for his supposedly deceased wife and child while she lived somewhere else with Webb and Nathan. Agent Chen, were there life insurance policies involved? Yes. Jennifer had taken out substantial life insurance policies on herself and Nathan with David as the beneficiary. The premiums were being paid with money stolen from family members. Williams turned to face the jury. So Jennifer Webb was stealing from the Martinez family to pay for life insurance policies that she planned to collect fraudulently after faking her own death and kidnapping Nathan. That's correct. David was trembling beside me. Jennifer hadn't just planned to steal from us. She'd planned to destroy David emotionally by making him believe his wife and child were dead while she lived comfortably somewhere else with Nathan and the insurance money. Agent Chen, What prevented this plan from being executed? Carol Martinez's decision to report the hospital bill fraud initiated an investigation that uncovered the entire operation before Jennifer could stage the fake deaths. William smiled. So, Mrs. Martinez's refusal to pay a fraudulent bill saved her grandson's life and possibly her son's life. According to Webb's notes, if David had become suspicious or uncooperative, he was also targeted for elimination. Jennifer's attorney, Stevens, stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This is highly prejudicial. Overruled. The witness may continue. Agent Chen pulled out another document. Marcus Webb's operational notes include specific plans for making David Martinez's death appear accidental if he discovered the truth about Jennifer UNK's identity. I grabbed David's hand as the full scope of Jennifer UNK's plan became clear. She hadn't just targeted our family for financial fraud. She'd planned to psychologically destroy David, kidnap Nathan, possibly murder David if necessary, and steal hundreds of thousands of dollars in the process. Agent Chen, in your professional opinion, what would have happened to the Martinez family if Carol Martinez had not reported the fraudulent hospital bill? Based on Webb's timeline, Jennifer would have staged her death and Nathan's death within 6 months of his birth. David would have grieved for his supposedly deceased family while Jennifer and Webb collected insurance money and prepared Nathan for future criminal operations. Future criminal operations. Webb's notes indicate that Nathan would have been raised to become part of the family infiltration operation when he reached adulthood. He would have been trained to target wealthy families just like his mother did. My grandson had been destined to become a criminal from birth, raised by people who'd kidnapped him and forced him to commit crimes against innocent families. Williams turned to face Jennifer at the defendant's table. Ms. Webb, do you still maintain that you were a victim forced into criminal activity by your ex-husband? Jennifer had been staring at the table throughout Agent Chen's testimony, but now she looked up with the coldest expression I'd ever seen. No, she said quietly. I don't, Miss Webb. Do you have anything to say to the Martinez family? Jennifer stood up, ignoring her attorney's attempts to stop her. Yes, I do. She turned to face David and me directly. You people thought you were so smart, so careful, so loving, but you were just marks, easy targets who deserved what happened to them. Ms. Webb, Judge Morrison warned, I advise you to David. You were pathetic, so desperate for love that you never questioned anything I told you, so trusting that you handed over your entire life to a stranger. David's face was white, but he didn't look away. And Carol, Jennifer's voice became venomous. You were the perfect target, a lonely, old woman with money who was so desperate to be needed by her family that you'd pay any price for acceptance. Ms. Webb, sit down now, Judge Morrison ordered. The only thing I regret is getting caught before I could finish what was started. You have no idea how satisfying it would have been to watch David grieve for his dead wife and child while I lived comfortably somewhere else with Nathan and your money. 2 court officers moved toward Jennifer as she continued her rant. Nathan would have grown up to be just like me, smart, ruthless, and completely unsentimental about family bonds. He would have been perfect for this work. Remove the defendant, Judge Morrison ordered. As the officers led Jennifer away, she called back over her shoulder, Carol, you may have won this round, but there are others like me out there, and you'll never feel safe again. The courtroom remained silent for several minutes after Jennifer was removed. Finally, Judge Morrison addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you will disregard the defendant's outburst. Please base your verdict solely on the evidence presented. But everyone in that courtroom had seen who Jennifer Webb really was. Not a victim, not a desperate mother, but a calculating predator who'd viewed my family as nothing more than financial resources to be exploited. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they retired, the foreman stood and delivered the verdict. On all counts of identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and kidnapping conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Morrison sentenced Jennifer Webb to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. As we left the courthouse, David carrying Nathan against his chest, I realized that Jennifer's plan had backfired completely. She tried to destroy our family, but her crimes had actually brought David and me closer together than we'd been in years. Mom, David said as we walked to the car, I don't know how to thank you. For what? For refusing to let her get away with it. If you just paid that hospital bill and stayed quiet, Nathan and I would probably be dead by now while she collected insurance money. I looked at my grandson, sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, completely unaware that his mother had planned to kidnap him and raise him to be a criminal. David, the only thing Jennifer was right about is that there are others like her out there. But she was wrong about one thing. What's that? I'll never feel unsafe again because now I know exactly what predators look like and I know I'm strong enough to fight them. As we drove home through the Arizona sunset, Nathan babbling happily in his car seat, I realized that Jennifer Webb had given me something she'd never intended to give. The knowledge that I could protect my family from anyone who tried to hurt them. And if another predator ever targeted my family, they'd learn the same lesson Jennifer had learned. Some grandmothers are too smart, too stubborn, and too loving to be easy victims.
Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Thanks for watching.